guys. So just everybody, Aoife Callaghan, mental skills and performance coach, from Ulster University. She's we're very happy to have her here. She's worked the last summer with us in our summer camp, and she does a great job in terms of just getting the mental skills and our players ready. So Aoife, we're delighted to have you. When you're ready, you can go ahead and start.
All right, thank you. Just want to say thanks for having me, firstly, and we'll just get stuck straight into it. So hello everyone, welcome to my presentation. Today we're going to focus on athletic self-regulation and how you as a coach can support that. So just a really brief background on myself. My name is Aoife. I have degrees from Ulster University in sports science and sports psychology. I previously worked with Basketball Ireland academies, particularly the Under-14 Academy, working within psychology, and also, as Nabil said, with Rend sports academies, working in their summer camps. I play basketball. I was on the Irish Senior 3v3 women's team 2018, and I currently play for Ulster University, and I also coach underage female teams within the local club. So just a brief overview of what we're going to discuss today. The first thing is understanding what arousal is. The second thing is what is self-regulation. The third thing is, as a coach, how you recognise optimal states of function within your athletes. The next one is how you measure arousal, how you measure it, how you identify it. And the next one is strategies that you can show your athletes and ways that you can help them as a coach. Then we'll finish off, obviously, with some question and answers. So first thing, what arousal is in sport. It refers to the level of physiological and psychological activation of an athlete, or how ready they are to perform. It's a bodily function and it's a physiological state. In other words, it's the body's way of preparing for the fight or flight response. It falls on a continuum, with 0 being zero arousal, no arousal at all, no readiness to play, and 10 being maximum arousal or maximum readiness to play. It can have both positive and negative effects on performance. It's directly related to emotions, and those specific emotions being excitement or fear. Nerves is another one as well. And individuality within arousal is key. So it's important for you as a coach to understand that each athlete will have a different level of optimal arousal. Typically, unpleasant emotions, for example, such as anger or anxiety, can be very helpful to some athletes. So obviously you've seen in my initial slide, there was Kevin Garnett, Dennis Rodman, and those are typically athletes who exude that real anger and they get angry to play. This is where they're most comfortable and this is where they perform optimally. They're just examples of athletes that perform like that. Obviously not every athlete is like that, and athletes may need lower levels of arousal to perform their best. So just going into the psychology of it a bit more, this is a psychological theory that's used to explain arousal and performance in terms of a relationship. So each athlete will have an optimum arousal. So you can see it just kind of here in the middle where it says optimal performance. Under that you have low arousal, and on this side you have over arousal, which is falling into anxiety and a stress zone, which is obviously will have a negative impact on performance. Likewise, you can see over here on the left, this is performance, this is low performance. So low levels of arousal will also reduce or produce low levels of performance as well. So previously I mentioned about the continuum. If we think that this bottom line is the continuum, here would obviously be 0 where there's low arousal, and up here would be 10 where there's high overload. It's associated with obviously panic, anger, and potentially violence. So if we're looking at it from 0, this is where athletes would be half asleep and look like they're just not ready to be there. And up on the opposite end of 10 would be where they're ready to run through a wall, borderline stressed, and also can't perform if they're ready to run through a wall. So as a psychologist, what we would kind of say is that 7 out of 10 would be a good standard to start off with, and that way you can either raise it or lower it depending on what they need. We also call this optimal zone a sweet spot. So basically, to summarize all of that, the sweet spot is somewhere between rest, which is here, and stress, which is up here. So you just have to find that optimal level in between. We're going to discuss how to do it. So why is arousal important within athletes? For optimal performance, obviously you want to get your athletes performing at their best. Arousal also places the importance on the relationship between the body and the mind. They work reciprocally, and one does not work appropriately without the other. So if you picture it like a seesaw, so one side needs to be balanced in order for the other side to work. If there's one is working harder than the other, then the seesaw will be not moving. It won't be working effectively. So this is important to remember whenever we're talking about arousal and the importance between the body and the mind. They both have to be working together in order to work effectively. Another reason why it's important is to prevent choking. This is probably a term that we've heard quite a lot. It's a psychological term, and it occurs as a result of inappropriate arousal levels that result in an athlete focusing on external factors of the game, such as who's in the audience or the opposition's bench is another good one to kind of think of. They lose focus on the physical factors that they should be focusing on, such as what they should be doing, what their teammates are doing. And basically, appropriate arousal levels will enable an athlete to stay in control of their thoughts, preventing choking. And the final reason why it's important is it produces overall satisfaction within your athletes. So if they feel that they are in the zone or they are performing within this sweet spot, obviously they'll feel more satisfied moving forward. So what is self-regulation? This involves recognizing which emotions are associated with best and worst performances and attempting to manage these emotions accordingly through psychological strategies. Manage here is the key word to remember. We're not trying to totally suppress these feelings. We're trying to control and manage them in the best ways that we can. So it requires an athlete to be very self-aware and emotionally intelligent, which is quite difficult to do, particularly for youth athletes. It takes time and commitment, but the earlier you're able to implement it with your athletes, obviously the better it will be down the line. So measuring arousal levels. Now that we know what arousal is, we need to understand how to measure it and identify when an athlete is falling on either side of those optimal levels of under arousal or over arousal. This is done through different techniques that you can use as a coach very easily. First one would be through basic observation, so understanding the signs and symptoms of under arousal and over arousal and being able to identify these within your athletes. The next one is self-reporting by athletes. So this is just simply using questionnaires, which we'll look at as well in this section, and just simple and basic discussions between coach and athlete, asking them really simple and easy questions around their arousal and where they feel they perform best. So here we will discuss the physical signs of both under arousal and over arousal. You need to be very aware of these behaviours and also be aware of your athlete's normal behaviours. So if you have a Kevin Garnett who is normally very angry, you wouldn't try and suppress that and make them, kind of fall down to the opposite end of the spectrum. You would let them act in their normal way. The importance is you have to distinguish between what's normal and what is showing signs of either under or over arousal. Again, this just comes down to knowing your athlete as an individual. So the first sign you look out for with an athlete who's under aroused is a lack of physical effort, lethargy, or looking tired. This will kind of look like heavy arms and legs and just look like, they've been up all night and they can't run properly. Also slow reactions, keeping to themselves unusually. So we discussed the distinguish between normal behaviour and unnormal behaviour. So if an athlete is usually not to themselves, if they're usually in the middle of a group or very kind of key centred within the team, if they're just automatically go then and start keeping to themselves, you would kind of distinguish that as a level of under arousal, and it would be a kind of a cause for concern. Also, a broad attentional field is a sign for under arousal. What this means is an athlete will focus their attention on both relevant and irrelevant information, such as we kind of previously mentioned, opposition's bench. So their important information gets lost because the athlete isn't able to cue out just the irrelevant information and focus on the relevant information. We will discuss that a wee bit more because I know it's kind of a bit deep. So moving on, the signs and symptoms of over arousal. First one's increased heart rate, sweating, muscle tightness, Being overly emotional, and these emotions to look out for would be frustration, anger, emotions like that, that would seem to be over aroused and too hyped up. Those are the types of emotions that you're looking for. Also, blaming other people would be an emotion to look out for, and a narrow attentional field. So this is the opposite of what we discussed with the broad attentional field. It's when an athlete filters out relevant and irrelevant information. So where an athlete loses some important information, and from here they're not able to make effective decisions within the game. We'll go forward and we'll look at some of the illustrations to do with attentional focus, just so you can really understand it. So basically this top one, A, is the optimal level of arousal, where they have cued out the irrelevant information and they're able to focus on purely on the relevant information. This is where an athlete will make the best decisions, will have the right attentional control, and will be in control of their own emotions as well. So this is optimal performance. The middle one is under arousal, where not enough filtering has taken place. So this is where the irrelevant information comes in. And the bottom one is over arousal, where too much filtering has come into place. So some relevant information has been taken out. And basically the effect of this is that decision making is negatively affected both by over arousal and under arousal. So it's important just to remember that. So this is a self-report method. We talked about the questionnaires that you would give to an athlete. This is done after performance. So it helps to determine exactly how an athlete feels after performing, as well as their perceptions of these feelings. In the initial stages of implementation with this, the more frequently the better. So if you can give your athletes this questionnaire, you just print it out and give it to them to fill in and then take it back to look at. If you can do this after every training session and game, basically the more beneficial it'll be. The reason why is you can then look at the questionnaire after a good performance, you can look at the questionnaire after a not so good performance, and you can make the distinguishment between the two of them. How confident, for example, the athlete was whenever they were performing well versus how confident they were when they weren't performing as well. And you would be surprised at the very clear distinguishing between the two, underperforming and maybe performing within their optimal zone. It also raises self-awareness for the athlete. They're able to look back on these and say, I was really focused in that game that I played well in, and I wasn't so focused in that game I didn't do well in. And the more self-awareness an athlete can have, the better that they are at self-regulation. Remember, at this stage, the key to measuring arousal is not to determine how much anxiety or nerves or those excessive feelings an athlete faced, but it's how they deal with it. So it could be in the smallest amounts that they felt this anxiety, but they didn't deal with it well, so it was very detrimental to their performance. So the next slide is communication within arousal. Understanding arousal is very important both for yourself and for the athletes that you're working with. So a basic discussion around arousal with your athletes. Ask them important questions such as how you felt during that performance, how you feel going into big games. Does it differ between big games and normal games or training sessions? Do you already have any pre-game routines that you use? What do you think impacts your arousal levels? If they aren't sure of the answers, they can start to think of them, and it raises awareness, self-awareness in the process, and obviously the more self-awareness, the better. So how you can help as a coach. Now that we know what arousal is, what self-regulation is, how we measure it, and how we identify those arousal levels, we can focus on what you can do as a coach to help your athletes with self-regulation. The first thing you have to understand is the impact that you have as a coach. Athletes automatically look to you for education. Your job here is to provide them with the tools. You can't learn for them, you can't make them learn. You're a co-regulator in this whole self-regulation process. So if you think of it like flying a plane, the athlete is the pilot, you're the co-pilot. You provide them with the tools and the education that they need, but they have to be the ones to put in the groundwork. So it's very important to understand that your role as a coach begins from there. So the first thing you can do to help your athletes with self-regulation is basic education. A lot of athletes, particularly youth, might not have ever heard of the words arousal or self-regulation before. So it's your job just to kind of introduce it in a very brief manner. They don't need to go into a lot of depth on the understanding of it. So what it is, what self-regulation is, why they're both important. It's all the information we've covered within this presentation. what their perception of arousal and self-regulation is. So do they have any background knowledge on it already? Do they think it's important? Can you get them to buy into the process? You need to help the athlete to understand the relationship between how they feel on the inside and how they perform on the outside. So it's that seesaw effect again. Have to help them understand that mind and body work together. Also at this stage, where you would set the commitment between the coach and the athletes in regards to this process. So there's no point in continuing down the path if you don't have a set commitment from both the coach and the athlete, because obviously you just be wasting both parties' times. So the next thing you can do as a coach is ensure effective practice. We talk about practice, we talk about training sessions. So the first thing is reducing the unpredictability of any game. Having effective training sessions will reduce this overall unpredictability, and it'll put players in the best positions to be in control of their emotions whenever stressful events happen within a game, and obviously they do. You want to put the athlete in the best position to be in control of those emotions and to experience those stressful events without it being totally detrimental to their performance. The next thing within practice is patience. On average, it takes about 6 to 8 games for an athlete to understand their optimal arousal level or their sweet spot and how to get there. So you have to stick with the process for at least this period of time. Allow athletes additional time to learn the new skills. We're going to discuss some of the skills further down in the presentation, but obviously, like any other new physical skill, in the beginning it takes longer, and this is due to the conscious effort that's required from the athletes. Also, just remember that with increased effort comes increased fatigue. So recovery is really key on a mental side. The next one is to replicate game-like situations as much as possible. So it kind of goes into the unpredictability of the game a bit. But if your athletes become familiar, they're less likely to lose that attentional focus that we talked about. They're more likely to just cue out the irrelevant things and focus on the relevant stimuli within a game. It'll also help them to develop their own coping strategies. So if you are replicating quite a stressful situation in your practice, the athlete will start to implement their own coping strategies, which is really beneficial for you, because obviously they'll already have a knowledge on what they want to do and how they want to react to the stressor. The last thing is more just a tip. It's the use of video within your training sessions, just from a coaching point of view. Obviously, it's very difficult to watch all the players at the same time, as well as understand what you're doing yourself if it's something new that you haven't done before. And so video will just enable you to go back, look at what the players were doing, look at what yourself was doing, and see what was or what wasn't working. And obviously it can be used from an educational point of view. You can show the players what they did well, what they didn't do so well, and you can really break down your training sessions there and use them to be the most effective that they can be. So the next thing you can do to help your athletes would be a pre-performance routine. So you want to work with the athletes to develop a pre-game routine based on what they need to do. For example, if they need to increase their arousal or they need to decrease their arousal. This routine will include everything from the second the athlete walks out onto the floor for warm-up to when they step on the floor to compete. So obviously this includes their warm-up. It's up to you as a coach to decide what type of warm-up that you want to do, but just make sure that you've got everything in there and that it stays the same. We'll talk about that a bit more towards the end of this slide. The next part is try to include something that they like to do. For example, if they like to listen to music or they like to practice imagery, implement that in the warm-up. The reason for that is it increases testosterone levels, which ensure an athlete feels ready to go and in control of the task at hand, in this case the game. So it'll make them feel capable of what they're about to go in and do. The next thing is to keep the routine exactly the same every time. This will reduce the impact, the psychological impact that big games can have on players. If you keep the pre-performance routines exactly the same throughout the whole season, the psychological impact is much less reduced on those players. So the next thing is coaching strategies that you can use. The most important thing is to understand the impact that one person's behaviour has on everybody else. This goes for yourself as a coach and right the way down through the whole team. As a coach, you have a responsibility to control your own emotions and also your use of your language. So, for example, if an athlete has really high levels of anxiety going into a game, and they have low levels of self-esteem, self-confidence, discussing the importance of the game isn't going to be beneficial to that athlete, and it could be detrimental to their performance. So instead, try and use language that will increase their confidence, which might be just to reduce the importance of the game. Avoid punishment behaviours. This is whenever an athlete performs below expectations. This will negatively impact athletes' motivations and their overall ability to self-regulate. Obviously, it's going into a bit of a coaching philosophy argument to avoid punishments. But from a psychological point of view, we want to focus on motivation and having these athletes able to self-regulate themselves. What you want to do is instead focus on education. So you want to make sure that athletes are able to reduce the likelihood of that mistake happening again or that underperformance happening again, and ensure that they know what to do next time around that it happens, instead of just going straight punishment. Also ensure athletes are aware of what behaviours are acceptable and unacceptable. This is kind of going into the culture that you create as a coach. So if the athletes are very aware of what behaviours are unacceptable, obviously they won't do them. This goes for both you and the athletes. You know, they should be on the same page, and it helps just to create that appropriate culture within the team. The next thing is the focus of attention, which obviously we have discussed. The first thing is to control the controllables. Don't focus attention. This goes for yourself and the athletes. Don't focus your attention on things that are out of your control. Instead, focus on the things that you do have control over. So attitude, effort, behaviour, choice of language, things like that. The next thing is don't focus on external factors such as who's sitting in the crowd or the other team's bench. That was a previous example that we used. If you get athletes to focus on the task at hand and the process, this will help keep the thinking on track, and it will prevent what we call in psychology paralysis by analysis. So basically, this is where performance decreases to the point of catastrophe due to overanalysis and just thoughts being out of control. So if you keep the athlete thinking about what they have to do and how they're going to do it, it is much less likely that they will start to overthink and obviously then end up with a detrimental performance. So this is just a quote kind of to sum up the self-regulation. It's not a case of getting rid of the butterflies. It's a question of getting them to fly in formation. So it's not an attempt to get rid of emotions or suppress emotions completely. It's asking the athlete if they can make these negative emotions facilitative. So can they use them to their advantage? Okay, so these are some techniques that you can use specifically to increase arousal. First thing is self-talk. We talked a bit about the use of language already, but an athlete can use self-talking to increase their arousal using words such as tough, aggressive, effort, fight, let's go. You know, phrases or words that will really increase levels of arousal. Obviously, these are words or phrases you can use as a coach as well, either pre-game or in timeouts, in an attempt to increase arousal as well. Pump-up methods, which would include listening to upbeat music and a power pose. We'll discuss what a power pose is, but obviously the music will be totally up to the control of the athlete, what they like to listen to, when, how, all that sort of stuff, and that will be implemented in the pre-performance routine that we'd already discussed earlier. So a power pose basically looks like that, you know, your Wonder Woman, Superman pose, hands on hips, chest up, head up. It's a psychological technique that involves standing like this for approximately a minute, and it increases assertiveness and arousal levels. It might not work for everyone, but again, you don't know until you try. Psychology and psychological skills are very much trial and error method. When we're discussing the pump up methods, it's very important to use them with caution. Obviously, if we increase arousal, which is what we're attempting to do here, if we increase it too much, we go to the level of over arousal, which is where, you know, those anxiety levels and that catastrophe happens. So obviously that's very hard to come back from. So don't use all these increased arousal techniques at the same time. Likewise for the over arousal, but just try and use them one at a time and see where you get with your athlete. Again, it's trial and error. Another technique to increase arousal is to physically move. This would be get up, good warm up, lots of activity, be active, increase your heart rate, and increase your overall arousal. Obviously, this is to do with the pre-performance routine as well. The last one is imagery. Whenever you're asking an athlete to perform their imagery, the focus should be on in-game actions. This is just to get them ready for the task at hand, particularly if they're using imagery pre-performance. So you want them thinking about the game that they're going into. The thing to remember is important with imagery is the more vivid, the better. So try and involve as many senses as you can: hear, sight, touch, smell, as many things as you can to make it as realistic as possible. It'll make it as effective as possible as well. So the techniques to decrease arousal then, it's kind of just the flip of the increased arousal. The first one is deep breathing, and this has to be slow, deep breath. Again, this highlights the relationship between the body and the mind, how they work reciprocally. The next one is progressive muscle relaxation. This is basically where you tense the whole body, one muscle group at a time. You squeeze it for 3 to 5 seconds and then you let go. You just keep doing this until you feel physically relaxed. The next one is self-talk and imagery, obviously, which we discussed in the increase in arousal sections. You'll just do the opposite. You'll use calming phrases and calming imagery. And again, this is totally up to the decision of the athlete, what they feel works for them. Final thing is reflection and evaluation. It's just good general practice for athletes and coaches to reflect and evaluate after each performance, after each time that they learn a new skill or they try out a new psychological technique. It helps them really establish what's helpful and what's not helpful. So obviously it's just a time saver. It also raises self-awareness. Those are words we've already used previously, but the more self-awareness, the better able an athlete is to self-regulate. It'll also, what you're trying to do as a coach whenever you're teaching your athletes to reflect and evaluate, is to be accountable for their thoughts, their feelings, their behaviours during performance and understand how it impacts their performance. So you're asking them just to sit and think and be aware of their emotions and how they influence the way they play. As an athlete, you're getting them to accept responsibility and share responsibility for errors that occur. This is particularly important, obviously, within a team sport. It's good for culture as well. And obviously, critical reflection is just another form of self-evaluation. As a coach, you're there to provide feedback. We've already talked about the fact that you're a co-pilot. So what you're doing is providing them with the tools to self-evaluate by themselves and self-reflect on the psychological skills themselves. So you can provide performance-related data such as video, stats, in order to help them self-reflect. But obviously, remember, they are in the driving seat. The important thing with evaluation as well is to keep it positive and keep it productive and keep it education-based. You're always trying to teach the athletes something, and you're helping them at the end of it all to solve their own problems. This means that the next time it happens, they're less likely to look to you as a coach for answers or for help, and you'll just teach them basically more down the line. So what we're looking at now is basically a recap. It's a step-by-step guide that you can take away right now and use with your athletes for how to implement arousal levels and self-regulation. So the first thing is obviously education. Here you can kind of use your coaching philosophy a bit and be creative. You can use videos, you can use photos. If you go on Google, you'll find loads of stuff on self-arousal and those athletes who are over-aroused versus those athletes who are under-aroused, or athletes who like to perform angry or perform calm. The next thing is to identify your target arousal. We kind of discussed that it would be around 7 out of 10 to start off with. Obviously, this can be changed depending on how the athlete performs at that arousal level. But remember, it takes 6 to 8 games approximately for an athlete to understand their optimal level and how to get there. The next one, obviously, is our pre-performance routine that we've discussed. And this will entirely depend on whether you need to increase your arousal, decrease your arousal, or maintain your arousal levels. The next one is the implementation phase. This is where you allow your time and your extra patience for both yourself and the athletes to learn how to implement them within their game. The next one is feedback. This is after each game and practice where possible. And just remember to keep it two-sided and remember to bring that open communication the whole way through the process. And the last one is to adjust and refine those skills where necessary. I obviously previously mentioned that it's a trial and error basis. So you try it. If it doesn't work with your athletes, you talk about it, you feedback on it, you reflect, and then you adjust or you refine it. So for example, if an athlete prefers to use progressive muscle relaxation and they feel that it really worked and had a beneficial impact on their performance, you would use this. And then if they used imagery and it didn't really work for them, obviously you would avoid the use of this. So you just go off what the athlete feels works based on their performance. All right, so that's the end of the presentation. I've just left my email address there. That's my Twitter handle as well, in case anyone wants to hop on, ask me any questions, and anything at all. I'll be more than happy to answer. So thank you very much, everyone, for listening, and we'll open the floor for some questions.
Really good stuff, Aoife. Really appreciate you taking the time and sharing all that stuff. I've got a couple of questions right here, so we'll fire them off to you and hopefully help our coaches. So the first one is, if an athlete finds that he or she is not at optimal arousal levels, what would you say that they can do personally to self-regulate? I think this is coming from a player who's tuned in right now. So if they find themselves not at the optimal arousal, what can they do to self-regulate?
Okay, well, the important thing obviously to do is to look at your performance and identify whether you are under aroused or over aroused. From then, you can apply some of the techniques just within your own game. But the important thing is to understand yourself as a player, where you're normally at, where your psychological arousal level should be at. If you're there, how far off you are. Obviously, I mentioned it takes a certain level of self-awareness and emotional intelligence. But if you feel you have this, then you can go and then implement those psychological strategies within your game. So if you feel that you're underperforming or you're under arousing, then you put some of those psychological techniques that we discussed into your game, try them, see if they work. If they do, fantastic.
Awesome. And you just mentioned their self-awareness and emotional intelligence. Is there a way that the athlete himself could improve their self-awareness and emotional intelligence?
Yeah, I think it's just learning about yourself, which obviously comes from experience. The more you play, the more you're going to know what you're like. You understand if you like to play angry, you like to play not angry. So you look at your performance and you have to try and do it from an objective point of view. What can I see here? If I was a coach, what would I see? And that's a lot to ask from an athlete, especially if it's a youth athlete. So it's looking at stuff like game tape, where you can see where you're performing at your best. Look out for signs of any sort of emotions that you're showing. If you remember playing in the game, how you felt in that game when you were performing at your best versus when you're performing at your worst or not as effective, what emotions are associated with those performances, and just being really clued in on the difference.
Gotcha. And then next one there is, how important is managing routines and arousal levels in players between the ages of under 14 to under 11?
Under 11, 14. So obviously I kind of mentioned the earlier you implement this, the better. You're not going to go in straight 100 and ask them to start, an 11-year-old to start doing these psychological strategies, because it won't be as effective. But what you can do is implement a warm-up routine that you will use throughout the whole season. Basically, this will enable your players to know exactly what they're doing, when they're doing it, and they don't have to worry so much about the physical side of the warm-up, what they have to do, what movements they should be doing, what they're forgetting to do physically, and they can concentrate on their emotions, their control, where their attention is being placed.
So if some athletes benefit from a different team warm-up than the majority of the team, how would you suggest that they should do it? How would the coach handle that aspect?
I think obviously when you're looking at a basketball point of view, a lot of warm-ups have very similar aspects. They will have the physical aspects that you'll kind of have to go through, your ramp, your warm-up, your stretch, things like that. But I think if a player benefits more from doing their own sort of a thing, I think a coach should implement that sort of period of 10 to 15 minutes within a warm-up where an athlete can go off and do their own thing. that's where an athlete will really get in the zone and will really figure out where their attention needs to be placed. They can do those things that they like to do without affecting the rest of the team.
So are you suggesting that that 10, 15 minute period is like, all right, so everybody do your own thing, but it's still within a structure? Or is that kind of what you were saying?
Yeah. So if just say an athlete, for example, an athlete likes to use imagery or progressive muscle relaxation at the end of sort of a stretch, when athletes do disperse and go and do their own sort of a stretch, they'll probably be given 5 to 10 minutes to go and do their own sort of stretching anyway. But that's when an athlete can implement that imagery into their warm up without having to go off and do their own thing and ignore the rest of the team. So it's just having that level of awareness of what you need to be doing when you need to be doing it.
And then when we come to pre-game talks, and I know this has been there's been some discussion about this, but in a pre-game talk, sometimes the coaches might ramp things up, and sometimes coaches speak in a calm manner. Obviously, different athletes respond differently. So, how would you suggest for coaches to handle that aspect? Is there any advice there for coaches?
I think it's important, again, I'm going to discuss the self-awareness as a coach to know what your athletes are like. So by the stage of getting into a game, you should have a really good basic understanding of which athletes on your team are likely to be over aroused, which athletes on your team are likely to be under aroused, and obviously the use of language to do with either of those things. You might get lucky and have a team that are all sort of on the same arousal level, and then you can select your language quite easily. But if you have either side of the spectrum, that's where you might need to discuss with athletes individually, and you can really use that language effectively. Then when you get into a pre-game discussion with the whole team, you can use a bit more sort of in the middle language, not discuss sort of the importance of the game, anything to do with hype up or low down, just discuss the game, the tactics of the game, and you can do it that way.
Gotcha, appreciate it. You also talked about unacceptable behaviors. So once you've identified and you've discussed unacceptable behaviors and the athlete still continues to engage in this type of behavior, so how would you suggest that the coach should deal with it without disrupting the rest of the team's activity? The old school one is one person messes up and everybody's probably put on the line. So
Yeah.
if something like that happens, how would you suggest the coach should handle it?
I think the important thing is to communicate with your athlete. If you as a coach have made it very clear what is unacceptable within your team, and an athlete is still doing it, you have to understand that is a choice that athlete is making. That's a conscious choice. They know it's unacceptable and they're doing it anyway. So you have to ask them why they're doing it. If you feel, or the athlete feels that something is missing, or they're doing it for a certain reason, then you can try and alleviate that in another way. So for example, if they feel that they need to try and hype themselves up and they're doing something that's unacceptable, you can try and bring in another method to hype them up. But again, you have to understand the balance between what one person does within the team can affect the whole team. So you can't let it go on for too long, obviously, before it'll just be at the detriment of everyone within the team. So I'd say definitely communicate with your athlete, but do it quite quickly and nip it in the bud almost.
And this kind of leads us to, a YouTube clip that we've probably previously seen, and I know we discussed it. It's the Tom Izzo clip where it's during a game, a player goes out and perhaps messes up in the coach's eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And the coach obviously gets on a player such as obviously we saw in the video. From a mental skills and performance coach perspective, if you were in that situation, how would you have liked to have seen a coach handle that in a game?
Is that the one where he slapped the water bottle?
I think that's the one where he kind of got in his face and kind of yelled at him. He didn't slap the water bottle. He yelled at him, and then during the timeout, he kind of sat down and continued to get in the player's face. And some of the players and assistant coaches kind of had to hold him back.
Yeah, I think in that sense, and it's very easy to do. That's where a coach has lost control of their emotions. It's not necessarily a negative thing. Obviously, it comes across as it, but they're feeling their emotion in that time, which an athlete does every day that they're out on the floor. But it's understanding that the responsibility that you have as a coach to control your emotions. Again, it's what one person sees or what one person does affects the whole team right the way down the line. Obviously, that starts with the coach. So if they're behaving in a way that is unacceptable, and that if the coach has said, listen, this is unacceptable, and then they're going out and doing it, it kind of defeats the whole purpose of them ever saying that in the first place.
Okay. If we talk about that from a coaching perspective, where obviously everybody has different personalities, and if you have got a fiery coach and everybody in the team is kind of fiery, then it probably works. And if you've got a calm coach and all the players play their best when they're at a low state, that probably works. But what about the opposite spectrum? So if you've got a calm coach and the only way that he can kind of get his players to play at a high level is to raise their arousal level, but that's not his personality, how would you suggest a coach do that so that he can bring the best out of his team?
I'd say if a coach obviously knows that in the first place, that the players on his team need to be aroused, then that's a really good first step that he's made. A lot of coaches would maybe try and bring the players down to the coach's level and say, this is the way we play, this is the way I coach, this is the way it's going to be. But if you have a team of players that need to be hyped up and need to be aroused, you just have to think of the different methods that you can use. You could use that free time for pump up music. You can get a really good playlist going that will actually really affect arousal levels, and it's something that's so easy to do, but that you don't have to change your coaching philosophy in order to do it.
Okay. Next one for you. If one of my bench players is in a low arousal state just before they're supposed to go in, it's during the game, and we're talking about under 12 here. Okay. How would you suggest kind of hyping this young girl up just before she goes in the game?
I'd say one of the most beneficial things, and obviously at that point you have to think about accessibility. What have you got within your grasp? You can't start going and playing music in their ears. You can't start using imagery when they're about to go into the game. So the most effective thing and the most accessible thing that you have at that time is probably your use of language. So you just sit them down, talk to them really quickly, be sure that you're concise with what you're saying, and use those phrases that we discussed, either if they need to up their arousal or lower their arousal. It's definitely going to be through choice of language at that stage. But remember that you're just the co-pilot, so you can't just give them a bottle of arousal and say, here you go, drink that. You can just give them the tools to do it themselves. If they choose not to do it, then there's absolutely nothing that you can do about that at that stage. All you can do is go forward with an educational basis, teach them what went wrong, teach them what they can do next time, and put them back in the driving seat.
Okay. Can I just challenge you on that in terms of playing devil's advocate? That was kind of an under 12 situation. But let's say if we move it up to, I guess, under 16, under 14, under 19 maybe, and the coach is engaged in the game, maybe it's a key moment and he's trying to focus or she's trying to focus on the game, and perhaps they feel that they can't go down and get that player ready. Now, obviously, if you have assistant coaches, that could be a job, but let's, for this situation, assume that we don't have assistant coaches. Is there anything else that you think that can be done where the coach feels like, no, I have to really keep my eye on the game and I don't have the time to go and pump that person up? Is there something else that can be done there?
Obviously, it can be something as simple as, if you don't have the time to go and speak to them, but you know that they need that level of arousal heightened. You know that they either have to do it themselves at that point. If they can't do it themselves, you have to do something to help them. Again, it's your choice whether or not you want to raise those arousal levels. Obviously, if you're looking for optimal performance out of your players, you will attempt to do something. But it could be something as easy as turning around your player and clapping loudly and doing a couple of claps, and that will be an automatic pump up. It's something that takes 2 seconds. You don't even have to move, but it's just it's body language rather than the words that you say. So it can be used obviously more efficiently than use of language if you don't have the time.
Gotcha. Appreciate it. Next one we have here. I'm a positive coach and my general communication is positive reinforcement, and I encourage my players to make mistakes. There are very seldom moments where I shout and lose control of my emotions. I'm trying to find a balance. Do you have any advice for me?
I think it always comes back to the players. When you're talking about this, especially from a self-regulation, even a coaching philosophy point of view, the players are first and the coach is second. So you almost have to take a step back as a coach, recognize what you have in front of you and recognize what your players need. If that positive reinforcement works for your players, then that's great. If it doesn't, then you almost have to try and implement something within your coaching philosophy that can try and get them changed. But just remember that the players and the athletes are at the forefront, and then it's you. So you're just trying to change what you're doing to best suit the athletes that you have in front of you.
I think that's a very interesting point you make in terms of obviously you're trying as a coach to adjust your behaviors to your athletes' needs. And we know from kind of discussions right now, it's all about being positive and maybe not being so aggressive or emotional. So from a perspective of some people get kind of disrupted, or what does he think? What does she think? Perhaps she thinks I'm not doing a good job. Perhaps my boss thinks I'm not. How would you suggest that coaches handle that aspect where maybe they're trying to be calm for the athlete's benefit, or maybe they're trying to be aggressive or a little bit assertive for the athlete's benefit, but it's presenting a wrong impression on somebody else? How would you suggest a coach, I guess, address that or handle that?
I think open communication is the key thing there. You know, if it's not being accepted well, say it's an underage team and it's maybe one of the parents or it's maybe one of the athletes themselves, if you go back to basics and you strip it right back and you put in effective communication as part of your coaching philosophy, you will kind of face those problems a lot less of the time because your athletes will be more ready to speak to you. You'll probably already be in a reflection stage with the athletes anyway. So they'll be in more of a position to kind of say, you know, I didn't really like that, or I would prefer this, or whatever it may be. But it's again, it's just going back and working on those basic communication fundamentals.
Perfect. No, that's some amazing stuff, and I think it's really practical stuff that we can have. Actually, one more question just popped up here, so this will be our last question of the day. Let me see what we've got. I encourage the conversation, but my players are not ready to speak. That's all I have. So how do you address that, I guess?
I mean, like I've previously said, you are the co-pilot, they're the pilot. You can only do so much. If you're speaking and you're communicating and you feel like you're doing everything that you can and they're not listening or they're not ready to make that step within their own athletic development and performance, then that is just really unfortunate. But there's absolutely nothing that you can do with that. You can keep trying and you can keep giving them the skills and the tools to be in charge of their learning in that way and in charge of their development, but you can't force them to do anything. And that's just the unfortunate thing about it.
Gotcha. Perfect. Appreciate it. Really, really good stuff. We've come to the end there. So, Coach Chris, are you still on the line? Just making sure Coach Chris is on the line there.
I am on the line, yes.
Awesome. So we can just jump back on, and we'll close up there very shortly. So from my side, really appreciate both of you guys taking the time to jump on with us this evening. Coach Chris, have you got any final thoughts to give? Any final piece of advice to give our attendees?
Oh, any final? Keep watching clinics, keep learning, keep getting better. Use whatever resources you have, regardless of what it is. That's the best way to get better as a coach. Just make yourself better. Learn, read, watch, find a mentor, whatever.
Perfect. Aoife, have you got any final thoughts there?
I think just remember the importance of communication, both with a coach and right down through the ranks with all your players. If you have effective communication in place, then you're better in a position to educate and take things further in terms of skill development. So just as an athlete, remember that, the importance of that, and as a coach, remember the importance of that as well.
Perfect. Listen, I really do appreciate both of you guys making the time for this. Everybody watching, these replays will be available. The first 3 days replays are already up on our website. You will not be able to access them on YouTube. You have to go through our website to get those video replays, so you can do that there. Replay of today will also be made available tomorrow. Tomorrow evening, we've got Kate McDade and Alex Sarama joining us. Really good guys. So we hope you guys tune in and catch up there. So from my side, really appreciate everybody taking the time. Coach Chris, thank you. Aoife, thank you. We'll catch up with you guys soon. See you guys.
Bye.